Oh, hello. This is Right Honourable Limbo here today, and today we've got His Grace himself, Richard Nelson Williamson. Uh, uh, could you hear me? Can you hear me, or is it too crappy the sound?
Something's wrong with the sound. I can barely distinguish your words, to tell you the truth.
Tell you the truth. Okay. My apologies. Let me give myself a sec. Yeah. Yes.
Have you got something to do, Alan?
I'll do the table of contents for EC Volume 4.
Yes, fine. Absolutely fine.
Maybe signing in again.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. We shall officially begin now.
I'm sorry, the words are still confused. I have great difficulty picking out what you're saying. I can hear the words make a noise, but the noise is for me a bit indistinguishable. Can you do anything to make the words a little more clearly distinguishable, recognizable?
Is this recognizable now, Your Grace?
I think that's a bit better, yes.
Yes, my apologies.
No, that's
Yes.
all right. It's all right.
Hello, this is Right Honourable Limbo here, and today we have a very special guest, His Grace Richard Nelson Williamson. Firstly, before I begin, this video live stream will be 1 hour and 30 minutes long, depending on His Grace's wishes.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes.
No more than 1 hour and 30 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Do you want to give the viewers a quick introduction of yourself? I'm sure they don't need one, but go ahead. Just explain who you are.
I was I was a liberal in my youth. I found my way to the Catholic Church with the help of a Father John Flanagan, an Irishman, in 1971. 1972, I entered the new seminary of Archbishop Lefebvre in Écône, Switzerland, which was going to be the defender of the faith. Who was going to be the defender of the faith and which was going to be the defender of the faith? He defended the faith by founding a seminary and sending young priests, newly ordained, all over the world. Then I was ordained in 1976 as a Catholic priest in his society. I belonged to the church through his society. And then in 1988, that's 12 years later, the same Archbishop Lefebvre, consecrated me a bishop, again belonging to the church through the society, but not belonging underneath some diocesan bishop who would give me orders to become a modernist and abandon the faith. I was never under such a modernist bishop in any diocese. So 1988, I was then 1 year in the German-speaking seminary of the society. The Archbishop had already founded seminaries in 4 languages, the 4 of the most important languages in the world, all European, notice. 1 year in the German seminary, 5 years in the French-speaking seminary. How many years was it? 15 years, I think, in the American English-speaking seminary, and then finally 5.5 years in the Spanish-speaking seminary. So I was in the seminary all of my time until I was thrown out. No, one moment, no. And then there was an epilogue of a few years in London before I was thrown out of the society because I didn't fit in with a policy abandoning Archbishop Lefebvre and abandoning his policy, no practical agreement without a doctrinal agreement. And that was abandoned because the society wanted to cozy, the other leaders of the society wanted to cozy up to modernist Rome and not stay away from it as the Archbishop did, to keep the faith. And so they threw me out because I didn't agree with their line. And since then, I've been not under any diocesan bishop, nor under any society. So I've been freelancing, free-ranging, Freischütz in German, a free shooting. So that's my story. And I'm free shooting to this day.
Well, that's a quick and concise way to explain your journey, your Grace. I actually wanted to talk about your upbringings. You went to Winchester College, of course.
Yes.
I'm a private school boy myself. How did you find it as a young Anglican liberal? And
well, I wasn't. Well, I wouldn't call myself properly Anglican, but in any case, liberal certainly. I've got to distinguish how I found it at the time and how I found it later. Winchester College is one of the most famous schools in England, as you may know, and it was a very good school for academics and not bad for sports. There was the Athenian element and the Spartan element, and that was a characteristic of those English public schools at that time. I think they've become somewhat softer since, but they were very good, and they formed that class of men who were able to run the British Empire for a number of years. Now, of course, the British Empire is gone, but the schools are still operating, but they're not what they were. I'm sure of that. They used to stand for something. I think they're not sure now what they stand for any longer. Anyway, myself, I didn't enjoy the Winchester College at the time, and I didn't so much appreciate what I was being given, but I spent those years basically with a classical education in Latin and Greek. And since then, as the world has got more and more sloppy, more and more careless, more and more socialist, more and more idiotic, I'm very grateful for the solid formation I was given, not only in French, in Latin and Greek, but I also had some grounding in English literature, and it was sort of absorbed on the side, and some grounding even in French and German. So it was I got a very good education, and not by any credit, not with any credit to me, but all credit to the school and to my parents for enabling me to go to that school. So choosing that school. So I was very lucky in the 1950s. By 1958, my schooling was over. I was at Winchester College from 1953 to 58, and I left in a state of rebellion against its religion. I ostentatiously used to close my eyes during the Anglican services because I wanted to show everybody that I was not taking part, which was pretty childish. But then, you know, when I was a child, Sister St. Paul, I thought as a child, I acted as a child. And when I was a teenager, I acted as a teenage rebel. But I wasn't ever a fan of the Beatles. I was. My John Lennon was Ludwig van Beethoven. I was a great admirer and lover of Beethoven and Mozart in particular. And they kind of provided me with food and drink in the desert, in what was, from a religious point of view, a kind of desert, a liberal desert. Beethoven and Mozart gave me, without any doubt, a serious taste of Viennese Catholic culture, when Vienna was really Catholic. And I survived on that until the age of 31. Almighty God netted me through this Irish priest for the Catholic Church proper. But it's interesting that Wincol was founded by a Catholic bishop way back at the end of the 1300s under King Richard II. And at the time of the Reformation, the boys of the school apparently barricaded themselves in order to keep the old religion. But Elizabeth's tyrannical police forced the boys to adopt the Anglican religion, and therefore Wincol went Anglican under compulsion from the foolish leaders of England who ruined Merry England and brought in grey, dull, Protestant, proud England, which was no longer merry.
Certainly. This segues into my second question about education. So, as you, like myself and you, we're both private school boys. However, for a fruitful Catholic family, what do you think is the best possible option to raise our children in the future? Because public school, state school, is not an option. It is in the essence of the Antichrist, the modern government. So where could we stand? Are we going to send our children all to private schools, or are we going to all homeschool them? What's the viable option here?
Well, I would say case by case. Parents may find themselves within close proximity to a decent state school. There are such things. There were such things. I think there still are some such things. And could you ask them to keep their voice and their noise down? Please. Sorry, what was the question again? I beg your pardon. Where to send our boys, or where to send our children. Firstly, no girls at university and few boys at university. The universities today are the most rotten of all. I agree with you, the schools are not much good. Generally speaking, the schools are not much good. You have to go by the headmaster. And don't go to a school. Wincol now has a female headmaster. It's crazy. You shouldn't have a woman trying to teach boys. How can a woman teach boys virility? What's their education worth if it's not virility? If they're not made into men? How can a woman make men? Well, the Virgin Mary can do it, but I'm not sure many other women can do it. It's this insane wish that, this insane pretense that there's no real difference between men and women. There's a huge difference, obviously. And you need men to educate boys, and you need women to educate girls. So don't send children to a coeducational school if they can avoid it. Because the moment the girls are mixed in with the boys, it's no longer serious with the boys. Period. Years ago, there was a good Australian athlete who had an Austrian coach. I think his name was Herb Elliott, unless I'm mistaken. This is years and years ago. And he had an Austrian coach. And somewhere in some article, the Austrian coach was quoted as saying he's probably from a peasant background. And he said, if you want the cows to operate, you've got to keep away the bulls. No, if you want the bulls to operate, you've got to keep them away from the cows. So if you want young men to be serious, you've got to keep them away from young girls. Period. But that's old-fashioned common sense. The sexes are not equal. The men are meant to be the head, the women are meant to be the heart. But the head is meant to be the head of the heart, just as the heart is the heart of the head. But the head is above the heart, both in the human being. The head is on top and the heart is a little way down. And the church fathers, this is Catholic doctrine. The church fathers, one or more of them, say Eve was taken from the rib of Adam, not from his head, because she was not to be his equal, nor from his feet, because she was not to be trampled upon, but from close to his heart, because she was to be loved. And that's it. Women need love. Men need to be kicked around in education. They need discipline. They need manliness. So that's a major factor for consideration in a school. Making a boy, put in a boy in a boys' school and a girl in a girls' school if you possibly can. If it has to be state, then let it be state. If it has to be private, let it be private, I'd say, if there's choice. There may not always be choice.
I see.
Pius XI wrote an encyclical on Christian education of youth, in which he said co-education is a disaster, and of course it is. But it's part of this stupid modern world which tries to pretend that the sexes are just the same, and therefore it tries to unman the men and it tries to unwoman the women, and that the result is a disaster in both cases. Men are not meant to be womanly, and women are not meant to be manly. They're meant to be strong and characterful, but always within respect and inside the framework of their femininity. Women must never lose their femininity. They lose a great treasure because their femininity is needed for them to be mothers, especially. That's what God gave them femininity for, primarily for raising children, for bearing children and raising children. That's their forte. That's their strength. That's their mission. That's their vocation. And then when they finish with their own boys and girls, let them start with their grandchildren. Let them restart with their grandchildren, because their experience of wisdom is needed by today's young mothers and young fathers who have little to no common sense on parenting. It's gone because of the wicked liberal propaganda which is fighting God every inch of the way and destroying nature and common sense as furiously as they can.
To move on a bit, of course, like you said, you were converted to the Catholic faith at age 31, right?
Yes.
Yes, and you originally went to diocesan seminary in the Brompton Oratory, if I'm correct.
It's true that the priest who received me into the church was Father John Flanagan, and he firstly recommended that I should enter Wonersh Seminary near Guildford in Surrey.
Yes.
I tried their vocational weekend or whatever. Yes, it was a weekend from Friday evening, I think, to mid-Sunday. And there were, I think, 15 or 16 of us, a good dozen young men at that time. This was in the year 1971. So there were still some vocations. But the selection process of that weekend was led by a woman, a laywoman, a layman, and one priest out of a team of 3. And you can guess which of the 3 asked the question, will you be able to endure celibacy? Yeah. I almost fell off my chair. So she repeated the question, will you be able to endure celibacy? When Father Flanagan got to know of this, he was furious. He sat down at his typewriter and he banged out a letter to the diocesan bishop of Arundel and Brighton, who was ultimately responsible for what was going on at Wonersh Seminary. And he did not agree with what was going on at Wonersh. And therefore, when the Wonersh declined my services, which was pretty understandable, because at a given moment we all took part in one of these industry style, modern industrial corporation style collective discussions, in which the young men are seated around in a circle, and then a piece of red meat is thrown into their midst, and they're all meant to start discussing. So there was something seemed like peace and justice thrown into the middle of the thing, and I began talking about Garabandal, the apparitions from 1961 to 1965 in the north of Spain prior to Vatican II, and refuting Vatican II in advance. The Mother of God knew exactly what was going on, and she said, in 1965, I do believe, she said, many cardinals, bishops, and priests are on the road to perdition, and they are taking many souls with them. Well, you can understand the churchmen didn't exactly like Our Lady of Garabandal, and the priests at Wonersh did not particularly like Our Lady of Garabandal either. And so that was the end of my Wonersh career inside the diocese of dear Father Flanagan. So I was out on the pavement. He thought with his nearby parish priest, Father Watmore of the next parish, and the two of them thought of the Brompton Oratory. So, okay, I went along to the Brompton Oratory and I did apostolancy, which I think lasted about 2 months. And then again, I was not exactly politically, I was not ecclesiastically correct. We were given as postulants some courses on scripture by a venerable and dear, obviously dear old priest, venerable dear old priest, from modern books of modern commentary. And so at some point I said, what about reading commentary of St. Augustine? And that can't have gone round too well. Undoubtedly that remark got back to the chief, I forget what they call him, the chief of the oratory. He has a special name, it's not rector. Anyway, and after 2 months, thank you very much, young man, very good, but not for us, thanks very much. Bye-bye, pavement please. So I was out on the pavement for the second time, and I went back down to Father Flanagan with my tail between my legs like a whipped dog. Father, you sure I've still got a vocation? And he said, well, young man, I'm imitating his Irish accent. Well, young man, if you can't keep your big mouth shut, there's only one place for you, and that's a Cone. So he sent me off to a Cone, even though he himself didn't agree with Archbishop Lefebvre. His notion was Paul VI is irreproachable, the fault is all with the bishops. And that was not Archbishop Lefebvre's attitude. So Father Flanagan did not agree with Archbishop Lefebvre, but he nevertheless sent me under Archbishop Lefebvre.
Interesting.
From where I was happy ever after.
Yes, of course. Actually, speaking about your time in Cone, there was if you recall, there was a French documentary talking about Cone, and you were featured in there.
Yes.
Yes.
The windows that I get on very well here. Is that interview?
Yes, I think it was. If I got the transcript right here, actually. You say in English, there is no faith anymore today. There are many places nowadays where one cannot find it. I tried a diocesan seminary in England. It was observed. I tried a religious congregation in London. They did not want me because I broke the windows. Yes. And so it was necessary for me to come to Cone. Here the windows are still intact. There is no need for me to break them.
Something like that.
Yes.
I don't think it was the windows that I broke in the oratory, but I was once set as a task to brush off the bust of Cardinal Newman, which looks over the main road. So the traffic comes by, all the dust gets on the statue. Maybe there's wind and rain, whatever it was. I brushed, as I recall, the eminent cardinal's nose a little too hard, and I think I broke a piece off. So it wasn't the windows, but I think it was the cardinal's nose that I broke off because I was a bit too vigorous with the wire brush. That's my best recollection.
Yes. I've read a bit of your seminary experience in the biography Voice of the Trumpet by David Allen White. I think it's worth reading for the viewers, but could you give us an insight of how was seminary under Lefebvre?
The seminary under Archbishop Lefebvre, well, it was like all seminaries, Catholic seminaries used to be. There's a close discipline. There is an early rise. There is an early mass. There's meditation. There are classes based on the doctrine of St. Thomas Aquinas, wherever possible, which is simply common sense and sanity, church sanity. St. Thomas Aquinas is a stupendous gift of God to the church when it needed it in the Middle Ages, in the 1200s, the 13th century. And St. Thomas Aquinas has been a great strength of the church ever since, and still is. If only the modernists would pay attention, but of course they scorn St. Thomas Aquinas. They're idiots. They've lost their common sense. They're losing their faith. They're losing direction, with obviously a certain number of exceptions. But modernism as a whole is a catastrophe for the church. And it's a philosophical, not a theological problem. Not primarily a theological problem. It's a philosophical problem undermining the very process of knowing and undermining any idea of an objective truth. And where is the Catholic faith if there is no objective truth? So modernists are a disaster. They've lost their minds. Some of them without meaning to, some of them without wanting to. But the real criminals among modernists knew exactly what they were doing to undermine the objective mind and to pretend that there's no objective reality. And then we're off to the races. Anybody can do what subjectively they want to do.
I think you talk about this with Pope Benedict XVI's biography at the time, Cardinal Ratzinger, where you talk about when he was in seminary in Germany and how
Yes.
he prized scholasticism and basic Thomas Aquinas thought.
Yes, he rejected it.
Yes.
He chose the modernist line of thought because he found scholasticism or St. Thomas Aquinas too rigid, too impersonal, too scientific, too cold. He wanted something warm and feelings, you know?
Yeah.
All of us love emotional slop, don't we? Well,
Yeah.
emotional slop is fine, perhaps, in its place, whatever that place may be. Maybe it has no place at all in human life. But in any case, it certainly doesn't have a place in philosophy or theology or in the church's thinking. The church does not need emotional slop. It has emotions. Our divine Lord had emotions. He wept over Lazarus's being in the grave. He wept undoubtedly thinking of original sin and why Lazarus had to die and so on and so on. He wept over Jerusalem. Our Lord had emotions, make no mistake. But the emotions, he did not have emotions for their own sake, which is what the modern world does. It wants the slop because it loves wallowing in the slop.
So after you were ordained in 1976, there was a period where you were a normal priest for the society before you became the I think rector for Ridgefield in Connecticut. What were you doing in between that period of being a normal priest for the society?
Well, in the German seminary for a year, which had just started in Wiesbaden in eastern Switzerland, I was under Father Schmidberger as my rector, who was rector of the seminary. I was teaching. I was teaching philosophy and theology as best I recall. Maybe scripture, I honestly can't remember. It was a happy year. It was the first year of my priesthood. It was a happy year. Eastern Switzerland is a delightful geographical location, mountains, snow, and then the spring and the brooks, the babbling brooks, delightful. And I started the second year at Wiesbaden, but then I got called away because there was another left-wing revolt at Econ Seminary. The devil was troubling the seminary all the time as much as he could. He could see what damage it would do to him by putting so many souls back on the track for salvation. And so he did his best. 1973, 1975, 1977, 3 left-wing revolts inside the seminary. And in 77, I think it was 3 professors that left, and the Archbishop had to scramble around to find replacements. And I had been teaching in the German seminary, and maybe it had worked. So I was hauled back to the French seminary to plug a gap.
I see. I guess you're with an intellectual, you learn quickly, and you did become a professor yourself, teaching the seminarians. So,
well, I don't like to be called an intellectual, but I can't deny that that's a tilt or inclination which Winchester College gives to its alumni. You are at Wing Col, you're definitely interested and engaged in things of the mind, that's for sure. And that's where I picked up something definitely which enabled me to get a handle on scholastic philosophy and theology, and that's what enabled me to teach at the seminaries.
Out of related question, actually, for Winchester College, do you get invited to like alumni events, or do they see it as too anti-establishment to invite?
I haven't stayed too much in touch with it. In recent years, I've been a bit more in touch by responding a little to what they send, but only very little. I'm not really on their wavelength.
Oh,
Not
I see.
really. That's what how I will put it. I'm not criticizing their wavelength. I think Wincol, although it's now under a headmistress, for goodness sakes, heaven knows what it's going to become under her. I wish her well. She may be a fine woman, but I still don't think she's in her place as a headmistress of a school. But that's her business, and that's the school's business. And that's the modern fashion. Women run everything because the men are such rags, dish rags. The men are no longer men, so the women have to try and become men in their place. What else can they do? Why are the men not men? Because they no longer have God. They're faithless. And it's Cardinal P who said, where you've got no faith, you're going to have no men. And where you've got no men, you're not going to have a Catholic Church. I don't think he said that, but it was implicit.
Yes, it's basic verbatim. So your time, I wanted to talk about a bit about Connecticut. So the seminary moved to Michigan Armada to Connecticut. Was there like a whole transition period for yourself, or was it just already established?
I did 5 years teaching at Acomb, and then I think I've been told by one or two seminarians still alive, one of the seminarians who were seminarians at that time. I think the rest of the staff at the seminary of the Archbishop didn't care. I wasn't there. Let's just say I wasn't on their wavelength, and therefore I was out on my ear once more, I think, but in such a way that I came under an American to begin with at the seminary, the American Seminary of the Society, as it then was in Connecticut, after it moved from Michigan, I think in about 1976. But I can easily be wrong there. I don't remember exactly when Connecticut, Ridgefield, Connecticut, the seminary opened up, but it was sometime between 76 and 82 when I arrived there. I arrived in 82, and I was under Father Donald Sanborn, now Bishop Donald Sanborn, until the spring of 83. And then I was rector. Then I became rector of the American Seminary of the Archbishop Society, and I was always under the Archbishop, which was a great grace. He was a model superior, a great builder of the church. I think he's credited with doubling the number of dioceses under him when he was apostolic delegate in Africa in the 1950s and early 60s. And he built in Africa because he had the confidence of Pius XII, and he had the backing of Pius XII. But then, of course, along came John the 23rd, and it was altogether a different situation.
Yes.
Prior to the death of Pius XII, the good guys had their hands on the levers of power, and the bad guys were on the outs. Soon after John the 23rd arrived, it was the bad guys who got their hands on all the levers, and the good guys that were on the outs. And that was the story of and the drama of Vatican II.
I actually, relating to that, I asked the question to Charles Coughlin, famous monarchist thinker in Europe, and he argued that even if we had a Cardinal Siri as a pope or Cardinal Viviani, the Second Vatican Council would have still went through a sort of liberal hive mind mentality, because all the bishops were sort of modern in their thought.
Yes.
So,
yes, that's highly likely.
Yeah,
because there's a limit to how long the head can hold against all of those under him. And in fact, the Archbishop, if you read the biography of the Archbishop by Bishop Tissi de Mare, for instance, which is good, that's the Archbishop such as we knew him. If you read his biography, you'll see that he was elected in 62 as Superior General of the Holy Ghost Fathers, and he was due to stay as Superior until 74. He had a 12-year term, but he resigned after 6 years, halfway through, because he realized that he would not be followed. He would simply not be followed by the priests of the Holy Ghost Fathers, such as they became 3 years after the end of Vatican II. They would not follow him. So he said, okay, boys, have it your own way. I'll leave you to it. And he withdrew to a little flat in Rome where he hoped that some old sister would look after him while he went out to grass as an old horse after a very distinguished career, with his chest covered with military medals or ecclesiastical medals. But once he got to his flat in Rome, parents of French seminarians would be writing to him, Your Excellency, if our boys continue in the seminaries the way the seminaries are going, they're not only going to lose their faith, they're not only going to lose their vocation, they're going to lose their faith. What can you do about it? And so the Archbishop said, this is a sign from Providence. Providence wants me to go back to work. I'll do what Providence wants. And he set about looking for a semi-decent seminary, 68, 69, already thinking the whole church was going down the drain. The official church was already well down the drain. And he saw exactly where it was heading. He saw it was going to end in Pope Bergoglio. He could see it a mile off. All the other bishops ought to have been able to see it if they'd had his doctrine and his sense of the primacy of doctrine. But no, theirs is they're modern. They read newspapers, they watch television. Television was just coming in the 1950s, and they all want somebody nice with feelings. And that was Benedict XVI. That was the Mass of Bishops, and that is the Church of Vatican II. Lovely feelings, but they aren't going to be martyrs. And it's questionable how many of them are going to get to heaven. A few, yes, but probably not very many. Many cardinals, bishops, and priests, words of Our Lady, are, 1965, on the road to perdition. She didn't say they're going to be lost. She said they are on the road to perdition, and they are taking many souls with them. That's it.
Yes.
She's absolutely exact as usual, absolutely on target.
You mentioned earlier Donald Sanborn. I was going to ask, because we know in the period of 1982 to 1983, the exodus of the 9 priests, and then eventually Lefebvre in 1983 giving his sermon for society unity given to his seminarians in Ridgefield. What was at the time? What was the vibe there? Because of course, as we know, they're now a big sedevacantist groups. Father Chicago unfortunately passed. You've had Sanborn now running his RCI group. So, what was the vibe at the time?
The Archbishop was never sedevacantist.
He was never.
Never.
I'm not arguing for that.
He did once or twice publicly entertain the possibility. He said, it's difficult to understand that a pope can this, that. He sort of entertained the question, but he never settled on the sedevacantist answer. He must have he certainly considered sedevacantism, but he never went with it himself. And I think it's simply because of his sense of the church. It's all very well saying these popes can't be so bad as that. Actually, there have been bad popes in the history of the church. What is true is that the badness of these modern popes, their doctrinal badness, they may be good men with good hearts full of nice feelings. That's not the question. The question is, have they got doctrine in their heads? Do they teach the truth? Do they stick to the truth? St. Teresa of Avila said, I don't mind if my confessor is not a nice man, but what I need him to do is to tell me what the church teaches. That's what she wanted of her confessors, and she couldn't care less about the feelings. And that's Catholic. Of course, in true Catholicism, the feelings are there. As I said a few moments ago, for our divine Lord, he was full of feelings, but he did not look for them for their own sake. Feelings were his reaction to the object, not his pursuit of his lovely subjective self. That's sentimentalism. And that's what's riddling the modern subjective world. If you've got no objective truth, all you've got left is subjective feelings.
Yes.
And the world has when you lose God, you lose objective truth. And if you lose objective truth, you lose God. And either or both are disastrous. So the modern church is a disaster because it's pursuing feelings instead of truth.
Yes, 100%. I believe, though, Your Grace, you've misunderstood me. I didn't say his. I didn't say Archbishop Fev was a sort of Kantist. I was simply trying to ask what was the certain attitudes of the time from 1982 to 1983 with
Inside
the nine priests leaving. Yeah. Yes.
Well, the Archbishop said to the seminarians, "Gentlemen, you go the way you choose. If you want to go with these priests who are," this is what he said after the break happened. Okay, there was a break. There was a confrontation between Father Schmidberger, Archbishop Lefebvre, and myself on one side of the table, and 4 of the breakaway group of 9 on the other side of the table, including Father Kelly, Father Chicada, I think it was Father Berry, and one other. I'm not sure who that was. But there were 4 of them. And it was a discussion. And the Archbishop said, okay, let's discuss. What's the difference between yourselves and the society? What's your problem with the society? And they had a list, a piece of paper with 7 points on it. And they put down that piece of paper in front of the Archbishop at the beginning of the meeting. And he said, okay, let's discuss. Point 1, what's the problem? And so there it was laid out in writing, and the discussion began. Maybe lasted an hour. I can't remember exactly. Point 2, maybe lasted an hour. And then point 3, about a quarter of an hour into point 3, the Archbishop said, look, we're not going to agree. You go your way, we go ours, and may God be with you, he said. He did not say, you're a bunch of skunks, you're a bunch of rats, you're all traitors. That is not what he said. What he said was, you go your way, we go our way, and may God be with you. And he said, up till now, judging by the fruits, it looks as though Almighty God has been with the society. Up till now. In other words, maybe we'll lose it. Maybe God will lose us. We will lose God in the future. We have no guarantee that God is going to continue to bless society. Up till now, it looks as though he's blessed us, but you don't think we're right. We're not on the same wavelength. You go your wavelength, we go ours. Bye-bye. Perfectly respectful, perfectly calm. We got into the motor car, I can remember, with Father Schmid, the Archbishop, and myself. He said, all right, he said, now let's pray a rosary. And quietly, we prayed 5 misses of the rosary to put the whole thing into Our Lady's hands. And that was the break. After the break, the Archbishop said to the seminarians who were still there, and I don't think many immediately left because it was not clear what was going on. And he said to the seminarians, look, there's been a split. It's clear that the priests leading the society in the United States are not going our way and we are not going theirs. You choose, he said to the seminarians, you choose. He did not say, you must come with us, you must come with us. They're a bunch of skunks. No, no, no. He said, you choose. I only ask you one thing, and that is that you choose honestly. If you think they're right, please go with them. If you think we're right, you're welcome to stay with us. But please do not think with them and stay with us. Be honest and either stay and think with us or go and think with them. And that was his talk to seminarians. And life continued. From the seminary, we lost Father Jenkins, Father Collins, bishops, Father Samble, as he then was at the time. That's at least 3 priests went, maybe a 4th as well, I can't remember. In any case, there were only 2 of us professors left. That was Father Petit and myself, I can remember. So the Archbishop immediately called to Europe and brought a society priest who capable of teaching from Spain to help out in Richfield, and the school year picked up again, quite simply. No fuss, no scandal, no catastrophe, no tears, no feelings, just here is God, here is the way of God. This is what I think we are teaching you in the seminary. If you agree, by all means stay. If you don't agree, by all means go and may God go with you. That was it. That's typical of the Archbishop. That's his mode of operating. He was not playing democratics or democracy or appealing to the people or appealing to emotions. He lent on the truth, what he considered to be the truth, coming from God, handed down to him by his predecessors in the faith, and as he meant, handed on by him to his seminarians, so that they should do the same, keep going the same tradition of the church.
I think that reflects the patience and the goodwill of Archbishop Lefebvre. I think, to speak on another traditional priest, which lots of my viewers won't know, he's a non-Anglo, non-European bishop. His name is Don Meyer, Bishop Meyer. You, of course, know him, Mr. Williamson, Bishop Williamson. But would you like to explain to my viewers who Bishop Meyer is? And did you have any interactions with Bishop Meyer?
You mean from Brazil?
From Brazil, Campos.
The Bishop of Castro, yes. There was very little contact with the actual contact. Bishop de Castro certainly knew of Archbishop Lefebvre, but he did not associate in public with him in any way until he was retired from being the diocesan bishop of Campos. Clearly, Bishop de Castro had a sense of belonging to the official church, and that he had to stay with the official church, and that he was not going to break ranks until he had retired. When he retired, then he would no longer, so to speak, have the same responsibilities to stay with the team, to stay with his fellow bishops in Brazil, to stay with the modernists. Then he felt free to associate in public with the Archbishop, and that meant a lot to Archbishop Lefebvre. And we met him in Econ when he finally came to the consecrations of 1988. And Bishop de Castro was one of the old school, a fine bishop, a small man, but a great bishop. And he attended he was an old age, an advanced age. He took the airplane all the way over the Atlantic, which for an old man is not nothing. And he attended the seminary consecrations, and with the Archbishop, he laid his hands on the heads of the 4 consecrants, the 4 of those who were going to become bishops. And he said in a brief sermon, which was full of substance, he said, Bishop Castro said, I would consider that I was committing a mortal sin if I was not here today. I am here at these consecrations to take part and to give witness that I am in agreement with Archbishop Lefebvre. And the Archbishop was very grateful because it proved this presence, these objective and Catholic words of Bishop de Castro were the proof that the Archbishop was not cooking up his own kitchen, as they say in French. Il ne faisait pas sa propre cuisine. He wasn't cooking up a traditional religion which no longer existed. He was simply continuing exactly the same tradition that Bishop Castro learned in his seminary and in Brazil, that he had taught in his diocese in Brazil, and that he had the duty to come and testify to when the Archbishop was taking this brave step of consecrating 4 bishops without the Pope's approval, without the Pope's explicit approval.
Certainly. I believe this was 1995. You and the other society bishops consecrated a successor to the traditional bishop, and was it Bishop Rifan? You kissed one of the society bishops consecrated?
No, it was a Bishop Rangel.
Rangel, yes.
Bishop de Castro had not had confidence in Father Rifan. Father Rifan is still alive today, is a gifted man. He's a musician, for instance, amongst other things. He's gifted, but Bishop de Castro sensed that he's not reliable. And sure enough, Bishop Rangel was more reliable to keep the faith. And sure enough, when Bishop Rangel in turn died relatively soon of a cancer, then the priests that had been under Bishop Castromayor, who was already dead quite a few years, the priests elected, I think, Bishop Rifan because of his obvious gifts. But they were, all of them, already losing that sense of the old faith, which Bishop Castromayor had, and which Archbishop Lefebvre had in spades. And therefore, the bishops, the priests of Campos, without Bishop de Castromayor at their head, slid, just like the priests of the Society of Pius X, without Archbishop Lefebvre being alive to guide them still, slid. Within a few years of the Archbishop's death, there were already discreet, not secret, discreet talks going on between the heads of the society and representatives of the novice order. And those discreet talks led to the society sliding. That was in the 1990s, the discreet talks under the aegis of an organization called Group, I forget now what it was, GREC, I forget already what it is, Entre Chrétiens. That's group, I forget the R is for, GREC, Grec. Group is not réducteur, group, I can't remember. Something group between Catholics, discussing, groupe de réflexion, probably it is, a group of for thinking amongst Catholics. That was the name of this organization, which was set up to build a kind of bridge between the SSPX and the mainstream church. They had lost already the Archbishop's sense that the mainstream church you can't associate with nor talk with, essentially because they may be lovely people, nice people with beautiful feelings, but doctrinally they've gone soft in the brain and therefore they can't keep the faith. And they're not going to help you. And they're not going to help you to keep the faith.
You did say in 1991 that the SSPX cannot go into canonical regularization with Concilio Rome because it's got a totally different faith, if I recall correctly.
Surely that's correct.
Yes.
It's essentially correct. That was the Archbishop's position. They may be the nicest people in Christendom, but you cannot rely upon them to defend the faith because they have themselves largely lost the faith. Before he died in 1991, so in I think late 1990, he was saying, my friends, he said to a retreat of his priests, my friends, in Rome, they have lost the faith. I say to you again, they have lost the faith. Let us not deceive ourselves. They have lost the faith. That's how he put it. It was very clear, very straight. And I think in conformity with reality, what he was saying was in conformity with reality.
Yes. Well, I think this actually goes well with the next topic I was going to talk about, and that's upon the sort of the SSPX resistance and the Saint Marcel initiative. Now, would you associate yourself with other SSPX resistance priests such as Father Hueco or Father Pizal, or don't you associate with them? Because it seems to me that it's all scattered about the SSPX resistance, and there's no clear form unity.
Maybe the day for structure and organization is past. The Archbishop, thanks to outstanding personal and ecclesiastical gifts, was able still, by his deep faith and sanctity, he was still able to put together an old-fashioned congregation like the SSPX to build a small pyramid underneath a big pyramid, which was doing it all it could to crush the small pyramid underneath it. But he succeeded in building inside the church a congregation which would nevertheless keep itself apart from the mainstream church. How do you do that? Inside and yet apart. He did it. And the society stuck in Rome's craw. They couldn't swallow it down and they couldn't spit it out. They couldn't spit it out because it's obviously Catholic. They couldn't swallow it down because it was traditional. So they had to put up with the society, and it was a real pebble in the conciliar church's foot. They couldn't stand him, but they couldn't get rid of him. He never put a foot so wrong that they could say, look, you're a rebel and you are no longer Catholic. They couldn't prove it. And he had quite a following already. As he built up the number of his priests built up a following all over the world. And that's the one thing that Rome respected, was numbers. And they couldn't get around the numbers that he built up. And then in the year 2000, where are we? Before the Archbishop died, in 1987, it was a pilgrimage to Rome of the whole society. I think it was 87. And the streets a whole street would be filled with something like 5,000 pilgrims from all over the world, traditional Catholics who learnt to follow the priests of the society and therefore considered themselves as belonging to the society. And they flocked to Rome to take part in the society's pilgrimage. I think it was the anniversary of Fatima, 87, which would have been the 70th anniversary. One moment, 87, 17. Yes, the 7th. Oh gosh, that exterior. Is that the 70th anniversary? Or yes, surely. 70th is 70. The 70th anniversary of Fatima. And the Romans were impressed. Here's this street full of Catholics singing well-known Catholic songs, behaving themselves immaculately in the various churches, the basilicas that they were allowed to visit. I don't think there were no masses. We were not allowed to celebrate any masses in any of the churches because it would always have been the old mass, which also sticks in the bad guy's craw. But they did allow us to visit the churches for a Jubilee pilgrimage. And maybe it was a Jubilee year. I'm sorry, I just can't remember. And
the Jubilee year was in 2000, I'm pretty sure, wasn't it?
85, did you say?
I thought it was 2000, the massive Jubilee pilgrim.
Well, the Archbishop was dead by then.
Yeah.
No, you're right. I think this pilgrimage, there was a pilgrimage in 87. I'm getting mixed up. I think you're right. It was 87, it was a commemoration of Fatima. There was a society pilgrimage then. And then there was 2000 after the Archbishop was dead. And that would have been led by Bishop Philip and the 4 bishops.
Yes.
And that was a great success, humanly speaking. And Rome took into consideration, and they changed tactics. And they switched tactics. Instead of the stick, it was from then on the carrot. And the carrot achieved what the stick had failed to achieve. The stick has simply produced more and more followers of the old doctrine and the old church, kept alive by Archbishop Lefebvre. But the carrot, now. So we were invited to lunch with Bishop de Castellón Hoyos. And I always say, and they become famous, the 6 varieties of nuts before lunch, and then the sisters who served several courses of lunch. And at the end, the cardinal who embraced us all said, my door is always open to you, come wherever you like. And he gave us all a rosary blessed by the Holy Father, John Paul II, I think it was at that time, surely. And, it was all lovey-dovey and sweet and nice. And we all share the same religion, don't we? And I think I'm not sure we do. I think Bishop TCA quotes that in his. He's quoted it somewhere. I think he remembers that remark, and it's absolutely true. These characters in Rome, they're modernists, which means that you've got an elastic mind, which does not conform to the reality outside the mind. It doesn't aim to, because I can have much more feelings, or many more feelings, if I don't conform to the harsh reality outside me. So I'm going to give up on harsh reality and I'm going to follow the feelings. So once again, when the Cardinal pushed us out of his door, and he didn't push us out of his door, it was the lunch was over and we went on our way. And this is immediately after the pilgrimage, that pilgrimage of 2000. And from then on, I think Bishop Philly changed attitude towards the Romans. I think he was persuaded that the Romans were really nice. And Cardinal Castellan Horios was nice. Sure, he was nice. And from then on, soon after that, negotiations were opened with Rome. And by 2008, Benedict XVI, as it then was saying, we will proceed by steps in order to reintegrate the society into the mainstream church. And that was it. And by step, by confessions, by marriages, by ordinations, step by step, the relations were rebuilt. And the society is now, get hold of this, in Rome without being in Rome. One moment. Hey, it must be one or the other. Oh no, both and. We are really in Rome because they're so nice, but we aren't in Rome because we are still hanging on to tradition. We have it both ways. We can have our cake and eat it. We found the way of having the butter and the money of our butter, as they say in French. We've solved the problem of non-contradiction. We live in contradiction, and come and join us. It's lovely. You don't have to say either or. From now on, you can say both and you have the best of all possible worlds. You have a Roman approval without an approval. You have Roman disapproval without having Roman disapproval. It's marvelous. We swim in ambiguity. It's lovely. The water's nice and warm. Join us.
That reminds me of your I think it was a Stockholm sermon where you talk about how it's all lovey-dovey with the chocolate, but once the chocolate melts, we all fall into hell.
Oh, chocolate. Oh, who doesn't like chocolate? Only a few killjoys. What can you do? What can you do with this? We are rotten. Nobody still thinks straight. They can't think straight. They've addled their wits. That's another old-fashioned word, addle. And you addle, especially your wits, meaning you can't think straight any longer.
Yes.
And but the society is very sweet. The bishops, the 3 remaining bishops, are very sweet, and the priests are very sweet. Everybody's very nice. Everybody loves everybody. We're in Rome without being in Rome. We haven't abandoned tradition. We haven't sold out. And that's true. They've not yet, or formally, A-double-L-Y, they've not yet ever formally sold out. They've not signed on the dotted line. But now they don't need to sign on the dotted line because they're approved without being approved.
I was going to ask now of my viewers if they wanted to ask Bishop Williamson any questions. I'm sure, Your Grace, are you open to any and all questions, or
Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So, if my viewers want to comment a question for His Grace, that would be excellent. I did see a question earlier, and that was if you still reside in West Cork.
No, I've never resided in West Cork. I've visited West Cork, but more than once. Father Bellini is another resistant priest. He's not under me. The priests who say they are resistant are not under me. There's no structure. I'm not a superior of any organization or congregation. I don't take responsibility for the actions of other priests. I may well give them my advice if they ask for it, but I may well not give them my advice if they don't ask for it. It all depends. They're free agents. I don't pretend to control what they do or what they say. So I visited Father Bellini more than once in West Cork, but I don't reside there. I reside in Kent, southeast England, the part of England which is closest to France.
I was actually going to ask my two friends are discerning. They feel like they've got a vocation. However, they jovially asked me whether or not you could ordain them.
That's a big responsibility. Lay not your hands on anyone lightly, says St. Paul. I'm not against. I have over these last few years ordained a few priests, not a great many, but a few, yes. But in each case, they probably knew somebody that I know and trust. And I needed to have some trustworthy witness to their good sense, to their prudence, their common sense, and their faith. Those are the two most important things, faith and common sense. But they also do need some learning. So ordaining priests with no structure and no diocese in which to insert them is a dicey business. So I'm not ordaining priests just like that.
Oh, yes, sir.
It's easier to reordain and ordain an already ordained priest who's been ordained with the new rite in the new church. That's easier to do. But my advice for my two friends. Go on, two questions.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, so my advice for my friend would be go to the Novus Ordo seminary, then come to you.
Oi, oi, oi. That's Machiavellian advice. No. No, I'm afraid that's too cunning by half. Because it's true that if they are ordained in the Novus Ordo, they will more easily get under my guard. But if I know they've been ordained in the Novus Ordo with a view to coming to me, I'm going to be twice as much on my guard. I'm sorry about that, but look, we're in a chaotic situation, but there can't be too much anarchy.
True. Here's the second question. I think this is more like a
do I know any resistant priests in Australia? Yes, I do. In particular, Father Edward MacDonald, based in Brisbane. And I think if anybody gets in touch with any halfway traditional Catholic in Brisbane, they will know how to put them in touch with Father Edward MacDonald. But I think Father Ed will be somewhat as leery as I am, as careful as I am about ordaining priests. But there is a resistant network in Australia. It's very lightweight. There aren't many priests. I think now there are only maybe 2 priests in all of Australia, 2 resistant priests to look after all of Australia. What can you do?
Another question here is, what would it take from Rome for His Grace to believe that reconciliation would be fruitful?
Well, the Archbishop said before he died, given how this is not how he put it, but this is the meaning. Given how they nearly tricked me in 1988 into agreeing not to consecrate bishops for a bishop to be given us, for a bishop to be consecrated at some later date. Cardinal Ratzinger said, at some later date. The Archbishop said, well, what about the summer? Oh, that's a bit soon. What about later summer? Oh, nobody's in Rome. What about the autumn? Oh, well, that's a bit far off for now to say. Well, maybe winter, maybe Christmas time. That's really too far off. In any case, whatever the Archbishop suggested, the wily cardinal, the Archbishop used to refer to Cardinal Ratzinger as the artful dodger. He called him he gave him the Dickensian phrase of artful dodger. So the Ratzinger, sure enough, he was artfully dodging the exact date for the promise of a bishop. So Rome never promised a bishop. So the archbishop had to take the law, had to take the truth into his own hands and defend it, the faith into his own hands and defend it by consecrating without Rome's open permission. Okay.
Yes. Do
So
you have any more time for any more questions, or are you busy now? Because I know you've got your event tomorrow, Your Grace.
Yes. No. What? How are we off for an hour and a half? I haven't got a watch at this moment.
20 more minutes.
20.
Yes.
Well, that's another 10 minutes then. Okay.
Yes,
No,
okay.
I didn't answer. I didn't finish the answer to the last question. I forget what it was.
Oh, I'll bring it up.
Well, what was the last question again? Oh yes, reconciliation. Well, the Archbishop said before his death, obviously, he didn't speak from the tomb. The Archbishop said, given how Rome has behaved and how Rome has in the 1980s signally failed to defend the faith as it needs to be defended in today's slippery and subjective circumstances, where everybody believes that 2 and 2 are 4 or 5, given that, then from now on, there's no more talking between me and Rome until the Romans recognize, and he quoted a series of 3 or 4 of the classic anti-liberal documents of the great popes, Lamentabili, Pascendi, Humani Generis, and Lamentabili, did I mention already? The Syllabus, Quanta Cura, these great takings of position by the church against the wretched, modern, rotten, liberal world. The church has been accusing and convicting the modern world for a long time. For a long time, it's been rotten, ever since the French Revolution, very clearly. And so the church has been taking a clear stand, and Vatican II just paid no attention. And so the Archbishop says, when the Romans profess once more the truth of these great anti-liberal documents, in other words, when Rome gets back to doctrine, when Rome converts, when Rome drops its wretched nonsense of Vatican II onwards, then we can talk again. But until then, forget it. That was his attitude. No more diplomacy, from now on, doctrine. The Archbishop had played the diplomat for many years, trying as best he could to come to get Rome to do its duty, to get Rome to stand by the faith and look after all of these souls that need the faith, the souls that still know they need the faith, not the souls that love feelings and want feelings instead, but the souls that know they need the faith in order to be saved for eternity. And Rome's business is to look after such souls and not tell them that in any case Almighty God is going to let them into his heaven, whatever they do, and however many mortal sins they die. That's not the true God. So the Archbishop said, when Rome gets back to doctrine, then we will get back to talking, but not until. But that's what Cardinal Castrione, with his 6 varieties of nuts, made the society's leaders forget. He was charming. He was a charmer. After all, he said, don't we share the same religion?
That still sticks to my head.
And one of the 4, the Bolsheist of the 4 bishops said, no, Your Eminence, I don't think we do have the same religion. And Bishop Tissier noticed what his Bolshevik bishop said. He's a good man, but oh boy.
We have another question here saying, could you ask His Grace what stage of the 3rd secret we are living
in? What stage of the 3rd secret? Well, I think that we are full in it. A number of people that have known, that have read the 3rd part of the 1 secret, is strictly the 3rd part of 1 secret, not the 3rd secret. Those that know, that have read and seen, say that, we're in it now. That's to say, the period of rot and corruption of the church, following on the adoption of modern doctrine, that 2 and 2 are 4 or 5. Once the church adopts that attitude, 2 and 2 are 4, and exclusively 4 is one kind of mathematics, and it's the true mathematics. 2 and 2 are 4 or 5, in theory allows of the old doctrine of mathematics, but undermines it by allowing of a completely mendacious or lying form of mathematics. 2 and 2 cannot be 5. They can't even be 4.01. They can't even be 4.000001. They can be got. All that 2 and 2 can equal is 4 points and then infinite number of zeros. That's all.
I'll ask 2 more questions before we'll get to the ending of the stream. The first one will be this one. Could you ask His Grace his opinion on Bishop Laureat?
Bishop Gerard de Laurier was a French Dominican who drafted, apparently, a good deal of the Ottaviani Bacci, what do you call it in American?
Schematic.
I'm sorry?
The Ottaviani Schematas schemas?
Or I think it's called the Ottaviani Intervention.
Oh, yes, yes. Intervention.
In any case, the judgment of those 2 cardinals, Ottaviani Bacci, or the judgment of the 2 cardinals that dared to sign in public, undoubtedly many more cardinals agreed, but they didn't dare to sign in public because that was signing their death warrant in front of JP2, in front of John Paul II. So anyway, or in front of Paul VI, as it then was. I'm sorry, John Paul II was not yet Pope by any means. It was still Pope Paul VI, but he was possibly the worst of these conciliar popes. Certainly a ringleader of them. Why did I mention Gerard de Laurier? He was eccentric. Jean-Marie Rome had a very cruel judgment on him. He said he's an interplanetary rocket that's gone crazy. Jean-Marie Rome was a French intellectual of the time, and he noticed that Gerard de Laurier was flying at 40,000 feet in a world of abstractions, and he was not down to earth, and you couldn't necessarily understand it. He was all kind of abstractions and deep pseudo-Dominican thinking. Does that give you an idea of Gerard de Laurier? He kept the faith until he died. He acted as bishop, and he helped to found the Dominican House of Avrier, the traditional Dominican House of Avrier, which has kept the faith very well, and to this day is holding the faith, and must be a great thorn in the bishop's side. And that was partly the fruits of Father Gerard de Laurier. So his fruits were by no means all bad, but he was tempted to sedevacantism, and he took positions. He was invited by the Archbishop to teach at the seminary for a while, but quite soon the Archbishop had to ask him to teach no longer because his behavior and or teaching was too eccentric.
I'm pretty sure, well,
a good man, kept the faith, but a bit abnormal, a bit unusual, a bit too eccentric.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure he was the founder of sedeprivatianism as well, wasn't he?
I think that's true. He played, I think that's true. He played a large part, I would say, in the founding of sedevacantism. Yes.
Yes. The final question for you is by this gentleman. Do you think the SSPX Dominicans can be considered properly established, unlike Benedictines, who do not have superior of all Benedictines? The Dominicans, like the Jesuits, do.
Yes, but we're in anarchy and chaos in the church. Who are the Dominicans going to go? Who are the traditional Dominicans going to go to for a superior? They cannot put themselves under a modernist. They will go to the official Dominicans, and many of the official Dominicans, not all, but many of the official Dominicans will be sheer modernists. The Dominicans of the Jesuits were the intellectuals of the church before the council. The fish rots from the head. The council rotted from its intellectuals. And you've got several outstanding Dominicans who were modernists, and several outstanding Jesuits who were modernists, and they both played a large part in Vatican II, in misleading Vatican II. So what are you going to do? You can't go to a modernist to be guided in the faith. Doesn't work. The modernists may be convinced that they're still Catholic because the popes seem to approve of them, and that these popes, the conciliar popes do approve of modernists. A few extreme ones they condemn, but it's always very gently. They're very gently condemned, like somebody like Hans Kuhn, and so on and so on. So you cannot put the faith. To put the faith under these modernists is like inviting the fox into the hen coop. The fox is going to kill every hen overnight. It's in its nature. It can't do anything else. These modernists cannot do anything else except oppose, undermine, and dissolve the true faith wherever they can. And they're powerful, and they're clever, and they're trained. And they know the way. The worst ones, the beginning of modernism, used all of their Thomistic training to destroy the church. They used church doctrine to destroy church doctrine. What can you do with modernists? Do you realize what modernists are like? They're objectively, they're slime balls. Subjectively, full of feelings, nice people, but objectively, in relation to the objective truth, they're very bad servants. They will undermine the truth whenever they can. One last question, if you want.
One last question. Which actually, I'll give you a choice here. You've got one against saying best refuge, something against Lefebvreism. You've got a question on Greek Catholic parishes. And you've got one on the Eastern Church. Which question would you want?
I didn't hear properly. Just ask the first one.
Okay, the first one.
Well, are you familiar with the encyclical Quartus Supra? It seems to the best refutation of Lefebvreism from Pius IX. Honestly, I don't know Quartus Supra, the fourth above, literally, the fourth man above. It seems that the best refutation of Lefebvreism. What that question undoubtedly means is Pius IX was saying in his own day was true, but to say it after Vatican II is not the same. You can't, as long as the church was in its right mind, you could tell people to obey their superiors. But once the superiors have all gone crazy, you cannot tell Catholics you must obey your superiors, period. Next question.
May I ask, Bishop,
what is its opinion of diocesan Greek Catholic parishes? Greek Catholics are supposedly Catholic. I don't know the uniates, as they're called, UNIATES. So I don't know whether the faith is being kept in their parishes. If they are out from under local of modernist bishops, the parishes may be better than the other Catholic parishes. But if their Greek Catholic superiors are as bad as the Latin Catholic superiors, then the Greek Catholic parishes will be as bad as the Latin Catholic parishes. Many traditionally sympathize because of the liturgian community. Yes, the Greek Catholic liturgy has been generally, as best I know, maintained certainly better than the Latin Catholic liturgy. The Latin Catholic liturgy has been destroyed by Vatican II, by the new religion, by the new church. Last question, third and last.
Yes. I think this is a basic question, however.
What has been the traditional position of the church on the Eastern Church? Were their ordinations and sacraments considered legal? They were considered valid. I'm sorry, this is a domain, sort of canon law, where I'm out of my depth. Honestly, I'm out of my depth. I'm not a canon lawyer. So what has been the traditional position of the church on the Eastern Church? That's got definite answers from canon lawyers. Canon lawyers can tell you that. Were their ordinations and sacraments considered legal? Valid, yes. Legal, I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure the licitity is no, but it is valid. They need to come to communion with Rome in order for it to be licit, from my understanding.
That could easily be. I honestly don't know. That's the last question. Bye-bye. Love, love, love. Feelings, feelings, feelings. get lost.
Finally, before we wrap things up, Your Grace,
Before you get lost, go on.
could we have a little? Well, could you bless the stream? Just could you bless the stream?
Benedictio Deum, for all souls of goodwill, for all souls wishing to save their souls. Benedictio Deum Levitantis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et manet semper. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you, Your Grace. That's been an honor to have you on. I'm sure to keep in touch with you, and whenever there is something in my mind, I'll definitely come to contact.
Open to you, so long as the telephone's working, open to you.
Yes. Well, it was great having you. Thanks be to God, Your Grace. This has been Right on Williamson stream. It's great to have His Grace on, and goodbye.
I've got lovely feelings too.